I know I did a video before. I don't know if I did the whole video, but I know I mentioned before some of my theories on traps and the consequences they cause when you use them, so things you need to be aware of. And that was back then I had mentioned that if you're using traps, even if you're not constantly using them, even if you just throw one trap into a dungeon, someone steps on a pressure plate in the floor and an arrow shoots them, suddenly the party can slow to a crawl and they're constantly checking, rolling their search checks every step of the way because they don't want to get, destroyed. A lot of people, when there's one trap, they're assuming that there's more traps because there's the idea of the trap gauntlet, one trap after another. You see it in things like Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when they're heading into the temple to get the Holy Grail. Is that one? The Temple of Doom. Yeah, I think that's it. Last Crusade. I'm not very good on my Indiana Jones movies because I never sit down to watch them. I always end up seeing them like when they're on TV or something. Anyway, this is more on the theory of traps. This came about because I'm reading more of the DCC RPG, and before I can even get to the part about traps, I need to explain one of the design philosophies in the game. And this is a design philosophy that went all the way back to the earliest editions of D&D, and it's one that I was talking about in one of my past videos when I mentioned challenging players with riddles rather than challenging the characters by having them roll dice to figure stuff out. You're actually challenging the player to think about it. Well, this design philosophy that goes back to the early days of D&D is it's the players that figure stuff out. And it ties into traps because back in the old days, when you had a trap, the trap usually worked on a scientific principle, and it was if the players could figure that principle out, they could manipulate the trap in such a way as it doesn't work. One of the traps, I ordered a book from Amazon. It was supposed to be a book full of maps. And that's just it, just maps for playing games. But they sent me a book with a very similar name by a completely different book, and it was filled with traps. And I'm like, wow, how can it be that there's these two books, and one was called Dungeons of Doom, and the other one was called Dungeon of Doom. Dungeons obviously was the book with multiple maps, and Dungeon was one with just all kinds of traps. But the very first trap in the book had there's a portal. You have to, not even a portal, think of it like a big manhole cover that the players would have to lift up to access a tunnel that would lead down into the dungeon. And on the bottom of this, there was like a copper plate, and then there was this bristled brush that if you lifted up the cover, once you lifted it so far, a weight that was attached by a rope would get pulled out of the wall and fall down the pit. And that rope would cause that brush to spin incredibly fast around the copper plate, and it would build up a static charge, and it would shock everybody who was holding up the cover. So in 3rd edition D&D, what you would get is an adventure would say when you lift up the cover, there's a magic electricity trap. Have the player roll a reflex save, and if they fail, then they get, 1d6 electric damage. Old school RPG, you have a bunch of nerds sitting around who know a bunch of stuff about science and math and engineering and what have you. And so they want to put all that to use. They want to be nerds. That's kind of the point. And so they make up these nerdish traps. And if you can figure out how a trap works, now that one's you can't really see the copper plate on the bottom, but maybe the first time you get shocked, the next time you lift it up, it actually won't work because it's a one-time use trap. Once the weight falls out of the wall, it's at the bottom, and so the brush won't spin anymore. But regardless, not a perfect example, but you get the idea behind it. There's a scientific explanation for how this trap is working. So in DCC RPG and the old school D&D, you would put together traps that the players figured out. They were puzzles for the players to figure out. You didn't roll a die and determine whether or not you could find the trap and then roll another die to see if you disabled it like 3rd edition does. You had to figure out how to disarm the trap yourself, and if you couldn't figure it out, then you either had to just take take it as you made your way through the trap, or go somewhere else. And that was something that a lot of dungeons back then had, is you got to, if you couldn't get past one spot, you would go somewhere else. Just like in Sandbox Trocare, you don't have, I'm not forcing you down one path. You get to choose where you're going. So obviously you come across that locked door or that trapped hallway and you can't figure out how to get past the trap, then go find a different hallway to walk down. Now, as I was, watching this, not watching this, as I was reading about the trap and I got this idea in my head, there's an old school trap that I've used a couple times. Never in an actual game, always just with gamers to test their trap solving ability. And what it is you're in this room. It's basically a big circular room. And once you enter, the doors slam shut behind you, and or like gates, the portcullis will fall down, and you're locked in here. And suddenly, the ceiling starts to slowly lower down towards you. And a voice from nowhere, just a magic mouth spell, starts counting down. 10, 9, 8. And so the players immediately are going to start looking around the room. They want to know what's going on. They're going to try to get through the doors. The doors are locked. The doors are shut. If you want to be a total jerk about it, magically the doors disappear. There are no doors anymore. And as you hit about 5, well, as the ceiling's coming down and comes closer to the light source, the players can see that there's spikes protruding on the ceiling. And, it's going to come down and crush them. And then in the center of the room, there is a small column, and on that column is a big button. And what'll normally happen is the players will be searching all around. They can't get out the door. They're looking through around the walls for secret exits. They're checking the floor for secrets. They're going to exhaust every possibility they can, and then, at the last moment, the only thing they can do that they haven't tried yet is they hit that button. So right as it's getting down, 2, 1, the guy hits the button, and then the ceiling retracts all the way to the top, and then starts coming down again, and the countdown comes again. 10, 9. And so they figured out if they hit the button, the ceiling goes back up, and they have more time to search. So they're going to hit that button, and they're going to keep searching and keep trying to come up with ideas. And what's cool is when you corner a player like this, they come up with cool ideas. They're inventive. It's that survival instinct. But eventually, the way that this trap works is there's no other way out. The only thing that they can do, and eventually they come to figure this out sometimes, is let the ceiling come all the way down. They have to let the countdown go. I've had people who just couldn't figure out, they couldn't think of anything else, and they're trying to think, and I'm all out of ideas, so just, I'm going to let the ceiling crush me. And I've had other people go, there's nothing else we can do, so let's try letting the ceiling come down, and maybe that'll be the answer. So it kind of goes both ways. But what happens is you let the countdown go, you don't hit the button, and as the ceiling is just about to hit you, the spikes stop moving down, but the ceiling keeps coming. And so when the ceiling finally stops, it's about a foot or two above the ground, so there's room for you to crawl around. And then, because the spikes aren't there, now you can see that there's a hatch on the ceiling. You open up the hatch, crawl up. The spikes are still above, but you have a little bit, another foot or so of room above you. So you can crawl under the spikes, and when you get to the edge of the ceiling, there's a ladder leading up and to another hallway to get you out of the room. Now, I love this trap because the answer to the trap is exactly what you wouldn't want to do, and that is let the ceiling come down to the point where it's almost crushing you. But think about what this trap teaches players. You lock them in this room, and nothing that they do actually works. So you're telling the players nothing you do has any consequence, so your actions are meaningless. 2, you're showing them if you just do nothing, I, the DM, am going to save your life. That's not what you want the game to be about. You can't do anything, so just let me do whatever I want. It's bad trap designed for in-game use because it teaches players the wrong lesson. The only good lesson they can get out of there is maybe sometimes you have to just sometimes you have to think differently. And the alternate thinking is good, but that's why you run this outside of a game. You don't want their characters to be the ones doing it. You want the players to be the ones solving the riddle. Now, there's another trap that I thought of It was while reading this one of the dungeons that I got for the DCC RPG, and it's not in there, but the idea came to me. You have these funnel characters. Everybody's playing 2 to 4 characters each, and they're going through an adventure, and a lot of them are dying because that's just kind of what happens. But when you finally get to the end, my idea was simple. There's like, let's just say there's a 100-foot long hallway, and at the one end, there's a door. And where you just came from, now there's all kinds of different things that this could be. There's some kind of danger coming down, coming at you from behind. So you're coming out. Let's even make it a 200-foot long hallway. You come out the door. You're walking down this hallway, and at about the midway point, 100 feet from from the far end, there is a column. And we'll get back to the column. Now, something behind you is coming at you. Maybe it's a monster. Maybe the ceiling is slowly lowering one section at a time behind you. And so if you dilly-dally too long, you're going to end up getting crushed. Maybe spikes are coming out of the walls or the floors. Who cares? All that matters, you don't even have to have anything behind you. It's completely useless. Which we'll get to when I find out. All right, so you head down the rest of the 100 feet of the hallway, and there's a door there, but the door won't open. There's no handle on it. There's nothing. There's just a big portal, and you can't get through it. So you go back to the column. Now, in this column, there is a hole in the top of it, and if someone brave enough reaches into that hole, there's a handle. And what you have to do is you have to pull up and twist the handle. And what that'll do is the door at the end of the hallway swings open. So now everybody can leave except the one guy who has to continually hold this handle so that the door stays open. Now, this is kind of a dick move trap because the party is now forced. Well, there's actually 2 ways to do this, but right now the party is forced to leave someone behind to hold open the door to let everybody else out. For some players, this is awesome. I would love this. It can also kind of suck if everybody's only down to... You don't want to use this kind of trap if everybody only has one character left. You only want to use this trap if there's spare characters. Well, you could use it with one character left. Somebody's going to die is basically the point. So you got to figure, is your group going to be okay with someone dying? If there's extra characters, it's less meaningful because somebody's like, oh, I have 2 characters, so I want to play this guy, so I'll let the other guy hold it and die and we can all escape. That's, it's not as meaningful that way. On the other hand, if everybody's only got one character left, one of them has to make the decision to stay behind so that everybody else can get out of the dungeon. Now, this is why it's better if there's some sort of slow-moving danger coming, because it puts a time limit on it. They got to figure it out. But even if there's nothing, one person has to hold open the door, and then there's no way for him to get out, so he's effectively dead. Although that does leave the opportunity for you to bring him back at some point. I would never want to run that kind of trap. Well, I don't want to say never, but I would be highly unlikely to run that kind of trap with established characters. I don't necessarily want people to lose characters that they've put, time and effort into making and playing and leveling up and all that. But with 0 levels, it offers you an opportunity. On the one hand, you've got these 0 level characters, and you don't want to stay 0 level very long, and they're kind of meant to die for the most part. So one of them being left behind and dying isn't that bad. But if you can get a group where for someone leaving them behind is meaningful and not just, put this piece here and we advance in the game kind of thing. There was an adventure I played in Living Forgotten Realms, and at one point, in order to open up a portal, someone had to die. One of the PCs, not one of the players. No, one of the PCs had to die. And it was sort of like a self-sacrifice kind of thing. Now, my character was in that adventure, and I just jumped at the opportunity because it's the exact kind of thing my character would do. He believed in my character believed in reincarnation and all kinds of stuff. So for him, it was one step along the path, but he had never he had of course experienced death before, but never as in his current incarnation. So he was all for it. He's like, I'm going to help everybody, which is his big goal in life. I'm going to experience something new, which is one of his other big goals in life. So he jumped right up and volunteered to have his head chopped off in order to open up the portal, which was cool. So I think there's some players where for them it would be a meaningful sacrifice to leave one of their characters behind, or even their only character behind, to hold open that door, to be that, that Gandalf on the bridge, none shall pass. I will hold off the darkness while the rest of you escape kind of battle. One of my absolute favorite examples is the Executioner on the bridge. Oh my gosh, that's from a Thor comic book. You should find it because it is awesome. Anyway, that's the trap. I mean, it's just a simple idea. Someone has to stay behind, hold a lever, push a button, do something in order for a door to open. And the only issue there, and what I was kind of referring to earlier, is if the players the point of the trap is you want someone to die. You don't really want someone to die. You could easily just kill someone if you wanted them to die. You want there to be a meaningful death. But if the players find out a clever way to keep the lever held, or whatever mechanism you're using to open the door, let them. They figured it out. Remember, the point of the trap wasn't to kill someone, really. It's kind of problem solving. They figured out an alternate way to get past it, so let it happen. I am still trying to figure out a mechanism that would be all but impossible to hold up without without someone actually holding it. I want it to be a trap where someone makes that ultimate sacrifice with their character so that everybody else can escape. But at the same time, I don't want there to be some obvious solution. The one thing I don't like about the whole lift the column up and twist it part is, maybe you just stick a hook and a chain in there and then, drive a piton into the wall and wrap the chain around it, and now suddenly it's held up and everybody escapes. That's a little too easy for me. So I'm trying to find a way to make it a little more difficult. It's actually a similar trap I used for one of the bad guys I came up with. His name was they called him the Asp. But to get into his house, there was like a big manhole cover, and in that manhole cover there was a small hole, just big enough for a man's arm to fit into. And someone would have to reach in there almost to the shoulder, and at the very bottom was a handle. And what you had to do is grab that handle and pull out a little bit, and then twist it, and then pull out again, and then twist and pull again. And the entire time you were pulling and twisting, the resistance got greater and greater. But right as you got to the end, a dozen needles filled with poison would shoot into your arm, which was a dick move. But that's the kind of thing he was known for. They called him the Ass because he was a poisoner. And then right at the end, right as all those needles shoot poison into your arm, that's when the portal would break free and you could enter and pass the door. So it had this thing where you couldn't just like attach a rope to the end and pull, because you needed to pull and twist and pull and then twist and then pull and then twist again. And it would be, because of how small that hole is, there wouldn't be a good way to set up, pulleys and counterweights and get it so that you could like attach 3 ropes, and the middle rope just pulls, and then the 2 side ropes are twisted so that you can twist the handle around. It wouldn't work. The hole was too deep and too narrow to get that kind of leverage in there. You needed like a human arm to do it. Anyway, the philosophy of the trap here that I was getting at, that first trap, think about what it teaches your players. It teaches them, don't do anything, because in the end I will save you all and provide a means of escape. The second trap just basically says, at first glance, the DM wants to kill you. Someone must die. Pay your blood money. But it also, if you allow the players to find out a legitimate solution to it and get past it, you say, hey, one of you is going to die, but you figured it out. Your ingenuity saved that character's life, and you were all able to escape without one person having to be sacrificed. But like I said, some players, for them, it would be meaningful for their player to sacrifice themselves for the rest of the party. So, I mean, if someone's willing to accept that kind of sacrifice, let them, you know? You can even reward them if you want to, but who knows? Oh well. I've had this video in my head for like a week or two now, and finally got it out. This, by the way, I think I might have shown this picture before. This is Hogue the Rogue. This is one of my brother's characters. We found this picture somewhere, but I just liked the way he looked. He looked very much like my brother described Hogue. Oh well. Bye bye.